Okay, let's dig into this. When you see a headline about a president actually apologizing to another country,
Uh,
especially over something like deportations.
yeah, it immediately signals something's gone pretty wrong, doesn't it? It's not your standard diplomatic update.
No, not at all. That kind of public apology, it suggests some real tension, some serious friction that needed smoothing over.
And it's that friction we're focusing on in this deep dive, using the reporting you've shared. Looks like solid stuff from a major news outlet covering this specific Kenya-Tanzania row.
Exactly. So our mission here is pretty clear. We want to trace this whole thing. How did we get from activist deportations to a presidential apology?
We need to look at the sequence, right?
Yeah.
The initial trigger, the reactions, governments, activists, the public online, even Parliament getting involved.
Yeah, all those pieces. And figure out what this whole episode tells us about, well, regional politics today, but also how digital stuff like social media plays into it all.
It's a fascinating case study, really, because understanding how key neighbors like Kenya and Tanzania interact or clash gives you a window into the bigger East African picture.
Right. So setting the scene, the whole thing kicked off with the detention and then deportation of a couple of really prominent activists.
Yeah, Boniface Mwangi from Kenya and Agathara Tuhere from Uganda. They'd gone to Tanzania, the source says, for the trial of Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader there.
And after attending the trial, they were picked up, detained, and then deported pretty quickly.
But it wasn't just that they were deported. The accounts they gave afterwards were, well, quite alarming.
Very. They said they were held incommunicado, couldn't contact anyone for days.
And alleged torture by Tanzanian security forces before being basically dropped at the border. Those are extremely serious allegations.
Absolutely. And because these are well-known figures, those claims instantly grabbed headlines and, sparked a lot of concern, a lot of condemnation from rights groups.
It immediately amplified everything. This wasn't just a bureaucratic deportation anymore.
So the tension ramps up significantly there. Now, Tanzania's official response. It's interesting.
Well, the source notes they haven't directly addressed those specific torture allegations, which is maybe telling in itself.
But President Samia Suluhu Hassan did speak out, though, before Ruto's apology. She warned against activists from neighboring countries. Meddling was the word used.
Right, causing chaos in Tanzania. So from their side, the framing was very much about sovereignty, about protecting the nation from, outside interference.
Not about the activists' specific claims of mistreatment. It's positioned as a defense against external actors.
A classic sovereignty argument. But at the same time, you had the governments of Kenya and Uganda getting involved officially.
Yeah, the source is clear. They lodged formal protests about the detentions. And crucially, they protested being denied consular access.
Which is a big deal in diplomatic terms. They were saying, look, we asked repeatedly to see our citizens as per standard protocol, and we were refused.
So that denial of consular access, it really pushed it beyond just the activist story. It became a state-to-state issue, a breach of accepted diplomatic practice.
Definitely. It adds that official layer of grievance. And while all this was happening, the diplomatic back and forth, another front opened up.
The digital one, social media.
Exactly. The reports of how the activists were treated, it apparently triggered what the source called an online war.
Kenyans and Tanzanians basically going head-to-head online, arguing about the deportations, the allegations, the official statements.
And it got quite personal, it seems. The source highlights that some Kenyans on social media started directly targeting President Samia.
Yeah, aiming comments directly at her, which later got labeled cyberbullying.
And what's really striking is how fast that online stuff bled into the formal political system in Tanzania.
You mean the parliament?
Yes. That targeting of President Samia became a major flashpoint in the Tanzanian parliament. MPs were apparently furious.
The source says they were outraged about, quote, young Kenyans trolling their president. They saw it as disrespectful, a direct challenge.
A challenge to Tanzania's sovereignty, essentially. They were defending her, defending their national interest against this kind of, digital onslaught.
So the online anger directly fuels parliamentary debate. But then it bounces back again, doesn't it?
It does, because reports of what the Tanzanian MPs were saying then angered some Kenyans.
And their reaction was pretty direct.
Very direct. They apparently started sharing the contact details, phone numbers of Tanzanian MPs online.
Wow. And just flooding their phones with messages?
Yeah, expressing their anger about the MP's comments. The source specifically mentions one MP, Jessica Msambatavangu from Orangatown.
What happened with her?
She said most messages came via WhatsApp, so many that she had to switch her phone off for a bit, just completely overwhelmed.
Okay, that takes the online conflict to a really personal, disruptive level for these officials.
But here's the twist with MP Msambatavangu. Despite being bombarded like that, the source quotes her saying she actually welcomed the contact.
Really? Welcomed it?
Yeah, she apparently told the Kenyans contacting her to counter ideas with ideas, not just shut down the conversation.
That's unexpected. Did she take it further?
Reportedly, yes. She asked the young Kenyans to set up a WhatsApp group for more discussion, said she'd join them for a live session.
Huh. And framed it as, Kenyans are our neighbors or brothers, we can't ignore each other.
It's quite a moment, isn't it? Amidst all the official tension and the online fighting, you have this one MP trying to open a direct digital channel for dialogue.
It really highlights how unpredictable this digital space is. Traditional diplomacy has its channels, but this is direct citizen-to-representative contact, across borders, driven by anger, but maybe, potentially, leading to dialogue.
Or at least the attempts at dialogue. It forces officials to react in ways they probably never expected, deciding whether to engage with this kind of digital citizen diplomacy, even when it's hostile.
It certainly complicates the neat lines of state-to-state relations.
Definitely. It shows these platforms aren't just broadcast tools, they're interactive, sometimes messy, sometimes confrontational spaces that bypass the usual gatekeepers.
Okay, so we've got all these layers piled up. The initial deportation and the awful claims, the government's protesting, President Samia's warning, the online war escalating to target her, the parliamentary backlash, the counter-backlash, flooding MPs' phones. It's a lot.
It is a real tangled knot of diplomatic and digital tension.
Which brings us back to the beginning. President Ruto's apology. How did that finally happen amidst all this?
Well, the setting was significant. It happened during a national prayer breakfast in Kenya.
A very public forum.
Exactly. And the source suggests it was framed very much as an olive branch, an attempt to lower the temperature after everything that had happened.
What did he actually say?
He said, quite directly, to our neighbors from Tanzania, if we have wronged you in any way, forgive us. And he added something like, if there is anything that Kenyans have done that is not right, we want to apologize.
And connected it to reconciliation, apparently. Mentioned a preacher who was there.
Yeah, reportedly linked it to a call for reconciliation from a visiting American preacher. Making it public like that, at that kind of event, seems like a deliberate signal.
A signal aimed at de-escalation. Maybe trying to address not just the Tanzanian government, but also the public sentiment stirred up by the online clashes.
That seems plausible. Leaders increasingly have to manage public opinion, especially when it's being amplified digitally across borders, alongside the traditional diplomatic track.
So it was a strategic move, you think, to try and mend fences after things got so heated on so many levels?
It certainly looks that way. A public gesture after a period of very public friction involving governments, citizens online, and even parliaments.
Right. Okay, so let's try and bring this together for you, the listener. We started with that striking headline, a presidential apology.
And we tracked it back to the deportation of activists Boniface Mwangi and Agathon Hare from Tanzania and their really serious claims of being held incommunicado and tortured.
Then came Tanzania's response. President Samia framing it as meddling, while Kenya and Uganda officially protested, particularly about being denied consular access.
Which then spilled over online, this intense clash between Kenyan and Tanzanian social media users, including the direct targeting of President Samia.
That online anger then echoed in the Tanzanian parliament, with MPs defending their president, accusing Kenyans of cyberbullying and invoking sovereignty.
Sparking another reaction, this time Kenyans reportedly flooding some of those MPs' phones with messages.
Leading to that really interesting moment with MP Jessica Msambatavangu, who, despite the flood, invited dialogue, asking them to counter ideas with ideas.
And finally, the cycle culminates, for now, with President Ruto's public apology at the prayer breakfast, an apparent effort to calm the waters after this multi-layered dispute.
When you lay it all out like that, it really shows how tangled modern international incidents can get, doesn't it? It's not just government statements anymore.
Not at all. You've got official diplomacy, individual activist experiences, mass citizen interaction or conflict online, and parliamentary reactions all feeding into each other.
So thinking about this whole story, what really stands out to you? How these seemingly separate spheres official politics and online citizen activity are actually deeply connected.
Yeah, and maybe specifically that whole episode with the MPs being targeted digitally and MP Msambatavangu's response, it leaves you wondering, doesn't it?
Wondering what?
Well, what does this kind of direct, sometimes hostile digital interaction between citizens across borders actually mean for the future of diplomacy?
Hmm. Like, how does it change things when an MP like Msambatavangu decides to engage directly on WhatsApp with people who were essentially part of an online campaign against her colleagues?
Exactly. Does that kind of engagement offer a new, maybe more direct path for understanding, or does it just complicate traditional state-to-state relations even further? How do governments even navigate that? It really raises an important question.